A new beginning. Sarah Jenkins hummed softly as she folded laundry in their cozy, modest home. Moving to this new town had been a big adjustment for her and her 7-year-old son, Ethan, but she was determined to make it work. This move was supposed to be a fresh start for them, away from the city and closer to family. As she folded the last shirt, the front door burst open, and Ethan came charging in, his backpack bouncing as he raced toward her. "Mom, you won't believe it," he exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. Sarah smiled, accustomed to Ethan's boundless energy and enthusiasm. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ethan took a deep breath, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I found my twin. At school. His name is Tyler, and he looks just like me. We're the same height, we both have the same brown eyes, and even our hair is the same color." Sarah chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Honey, I'm sure he just looks a little like you. Sometimes people look alike, even if they're not related." Ethan's face grew serious. "No, Mom, you don't understand. He's my twin. He even has the same scar as me on his knee." Sarah's smile faltered. The scar Ethan had was a small one from a fall he'd had when he was younger, but it was unique in its shape. She brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to a child's imagination. "Well, I'd love to meet Tyler sometime. It sounds like you've made a great new friend." Ethan's face fell slightly. "You don't believe me, do you?" Sarah crouched down to his level, placing her hands on his shoulders. "It's not that I don't believe you, Ethan. It's just that twins don't just appear out of nowhere. But if you want, I'll come to school with you tomorrow and meet Tyler." Ethan brightened at her response. "Yes, you'll see, Mom. We look exactly the same." As Ethan skipped off to his room, Sarah stood up, her mind swirling with thoughts. She'd never heard Ethan talk about someone with such certainty before. Shaking her head, she returned to her chores, brushing off his insistence as an overactive imagination. Little did she know that this seemingly innocent claim would lead her down a path she could never have anticipated. The first meeting. The following day, Sarah walked Ethan to school, feeling a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Ethan had been so insistent about his twin, and though Sarah was sure it was just a case of childhood imagination, a small part of her wanted to see this mysterious look-alike herself. She hadn't been able to shake Ethan's excitement or the way his eyes sparkled with conviction when he spoke about Tyler. As they reached the school gates, Sarah gave Ethan a quick hug and kissed his forehead. "Have a great day, honey. And maybe today you can introduce me to this famous twin of yours." Ethan's face lit up. "Really, Mom? You'll meet him." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the entrance. "You'll see, Mom. You won't believe it." Smiling, Sarah let herself be tugged along, entertained by his enthusiasm. As they entered his classroom, the usual morning hustle and bustle filled the room. Kids running to their desks, chatting excitedly, and unpacking their backpacks. Sarah's gaze roamed the classroom, looking for anyone who might resemble Ethan. Just as she was beginning to feel like this was all a wild goose chase, she noticed a boy standing by the window, tying his shoelace. When he straightened up, her breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable. He was Ethan's height, with the same shade of sandy brown hair and the same lively brown eyes. The resemblance was so strong it was almost uncanny, as if they were reflections of each other. For a moment, Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, a mix of confusion and a strange sense of recognition washing over her. "Mom, that's him," Ethan whispered excitedly, pointing. The boy by the window noticed Ethan and smiled, walking over to join them. Up close, the similarities were even more striking. He had the same dimpled cheeks, the same slightly crooked front tooth, and even a small scar on his knee, just like Ethan's. "Hi, Mrs. Jenkins," the boy said politely, looking up at Sarah with the same open expression Ethan had. "I'm Tyler." Sarah managed to gather herself and smiled warmly, though her mind was racing. "Hi, Tyler. It's nice to meet you." She looked between him and Ethan, still struggling to process what she was seeing. Ethan says you two look alike. He even thinks you might be twins. Tyler chuckled, glancing at Ethan. Yeah, everyone's been saying that. It's kind of cool, though. I've never had someone look so much like me. Before Sarah could respond, Tyler's mother, a woman with gentle eyes and curly brown hair, appeared in the doorway. She smiled and waved as she walked toward them, carrying a forgotten lunchbox. "Oh, there you are, Tyler. You left this at home," she said, handing him the lunchbox. Then she turned to Sarah, and her face softened with recognition as she noticed Ethan and their identical features. Her smile faltered, replaced by an expression that mirrored Sarah's own confusion. "Hi, I'm Clara," she said, extending a hand to Sarah. "You must be Ethan's mom." "Sarah," she replied, shaking Clara's hand. She noticed the way Clara's gaze shifted between the boys, her brow furrowed, and Sarah felt a strange, unspoken connection with her. She could tell Clara was just as startled by the resemblance as she was. "They look so much alike, don't they?" Sarah ventured, feeling a need to break the silence. Clara nodded slowly. "Yes, it's remarkable. Tyler's always been an only child, so it's quite a surprise to see someone who looks just like him." Her voice held a hint of something deeper, almost like a question left unspoken. The bell rang, and Ethan tugged on Sarah's hand, urging her to leave so he wouldn't be late. "Bye, Mom. Bye, Mrs. Parker," he called, already pulling Tyler toward their seats. As the boys settled in, Sarah and Clara exchanged a glance. The resemblance was too precise to ignore, too perfect to be a coincidence. Clara seemed to hesitate, as if she were trying to gather the courage to say something. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" Clara asked suddenly. "I'd love to hear more about Ethan. Maybe we can figure out this mystery." Sarah felt a wave of relief, glad to know she wasn't the only one who found the situation unsettling. "I'd like that," she replied, offering a genuine smile. They exchanged numbers, promising to meet soon to discuss their sons and the striking resemblance they shared. As Sarah left the school, her mind buzzed with questions. She'd always known Ethan's adoption story, but she had never imagined that he might have a biological sibling, let alone one who attended the same school. She found herself wondering about the circumstances surrounding Ethan's adoption, whether there were any gaps in the story she hadn't noticed before. That night, as they sat down to dinner, Ethan chattered happily about his day with Tyler, describing their antics at recess and the games they played. Sarah listened, her heart warmed by his excitement, but a strange sense of unease lingered. She decided to share her thoughts with her husband, Mark, later that evening. When Ethan had gone to bed, she found Mark in the living room, reading a book. She sat beside him, biting her lip as she tried to find the right words. "Mark, there's something I need to talk to you about," she began. Mark looked up, closing his book. "What's on your mind?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It's Ethan. He met a boy at school who looks exactly like him. His name is Tyler, and they could be twins, Mark. They even have the same scar on their knees." Mark's brow furrowed. "Sarah, kids meet lookalikes all the time. It's probably just a coincidence." "No, this is different. It's like they're mirror images." And Tyler's mom. She seemed as surprised as I was. "We're going to meet for coffee soon to talk about it." Mark hesitated, looking at her with concern. "Do you really think there's more to it?" Ethan's adoption paperwork was straightforward. We'd know if he had a twin, right? Sarah nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at her. "I thought so too, but now I'm not so sure. There's something about this that doesn't feel right. I just want to talk to her and see if there's any connection." Mark reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "If it'll put your mind at ease, then I think it's a good idea. But let's not get too carried away. Maybe they're just two boys who look alike." Sarah tried to smile, but her mind kept returning to Ethan's face, and Tyler's, and the undeniable resemblance that made her heart race with questions. The coffee meeting. A few days later, Sarah met Clara at a cozy cafe near the school. They both ordered their drinks and sat across from each other, each woman sizing up the other, both aware that they were about to discuss something that could change their lives. Clara broke the silence first. "I don't know much about Tyler's biological family," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I adopted him as a baby. They told me it was a closed adoption, and I never questioned it. I was just so happy to have him." Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken sentiment. "Ethan was a closed adoption too. We never received much information, only that he was healthy and his birth parents couldn't care for him. I never thought he might have a brother." They shared a silence, both processing the implications of what they were discussing. Finally, Clara spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think they could be related? Maybe twins?" Sarah swallowed, nodding slowly. "I can't shake the feeling that they are. It's just, they're so alike. More than I can explain." Clara nodded, her eyes distant. "Should we look into it? I mean, a DNA test would confirm it, but that's a big step." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. "Let's do it. If they're truly brothers, they deserve to know. We can keep it private, just between us, until we know for sure." Clara agreed, her expression a mirror of Sarah's own cautious hope. They exchanged contact information for the testing process, each knowing that the answer to this question could forever change their lives and the lives of their sons. As Sarah left the cafe, her heart pounded with anticipation. She knew that no matter the outcome, she'd be there to support Ethan every step of the way. Hidden truths and new revelations. In the days that followed, Sarah's mind was a whirl of emotions. Every time she looked at Ethan, she wondered if his life was about to be upended by a truth she hadn't anticipated. The decision to go forward with a DNA test was not one she'd made lightly, but Clara's determination matched her own. They both knew this was something they needed to do for their sons, no matter how unsettling the potential truth might be. One evening after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah sat on the couch with her husband, Mark. She could no longer keep him out of this. The tension had been growing, and she could see his concern deepening each day. "Mark, I need to talk to you about something serious," she began, her voice quiet yet firm. Mark put down his book and turned to her, giving her his full attention. "What's going on, Sarah? You've been on edge all week." Taking a deep breath, she explained everything. About the strange resemblance between Ethan and Tyler, about meeting Clara, and the decision to do a DNA test. Mark's expression shifted from surprise to concern, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. "So you really think Ethan has a twin?" he asked, his tone filled with disbelief, but also a trace of intrigue. Sarah nodded slowly. "I don't know what to think, Mark, but when I saw Tyler, it was like looking at Ethan. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was like they were two versions of the same child. I've never seen anything like it. And Clara, Tyler's mom, feels the same way." Mark leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "But how could we not know? Ethan's adoption paperwork didn't mention a twin. There was nothing that hinted at this." "That's the part that scares me," Sarah admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "What if there's more to Ethan's adoption story than we were told? What if there were things kept from us?" Mark wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Look, Sarah, whatever the truth is, we'll face it together. Ethan is our son, and nothing is going to change that. But if you think this is something we need to know, then I'm with you all the way." They sat together in silence, each lost in thought. The road ahead felt uncertain, but having Mark by her side gave Sarah a renewed sense of strength. She was ready for whatever truth lay hidden in the past. A few days later, Sarah met Clara once more, this time at a small clinic where they would submit DNA samples from Ethan and Tyler. They had arranged for the boys to be there, under the guise of a routine checkup, so as not to raise any suspicion or worry. The boys, oblivious to the significance of the visit, were delighted to be together again, exchanging high fives and talking excitedly about their latest adventures in school. Clara and Sarah exchanged a tense glance as they watched their sons. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air. As they entered the examination room, a nurse greeted them with a friendly smile, explaining the procedure to the boys. "All right, you two," the nurse said cheerfully. "We're just going to do a quick cheek swab. It'll be over before you know it." Ethan looked at Tyler with a mischievous grin. "Race you, Ty. Let's see who can get it done first." The nurse chuckled, and within moments, both boys had completed the simple swab test, none the wiser to its purpose. As they left the clinic, Tyler turned to Clara with a puzzled look. "Mom, why did we have to do that? Is it for school or something?" Clara glanced at Sarah, then looked back at her son. "It's just a health check, honey. Nothing to worry about. Now, who's up for ice cream?" Both boys whooped with excitement, and the tension of the moment seemed to dissolve, replaced by the laughter of two children who were, at least for now, blissfully unaware of the mystery that surrounded them. The wait for the test results was excruciating. Days passed, each one feeling longer than the last. Sarah found herself staring at the phone, willing it to ring with news. She tried to keep herself busy, pouring her energy into her work and household chores, but her mind constantly drifted back to the possibility that Ethan's life was about to change in ways she hadn't foreseen. Finally, a week later, the call came. Sarah answered on the first ring, her heart pounding in her chest. It was the clinic. "Mrs. Jenkins, we have the results of the DNA test you requested. You and Mrs. Parker can pick them up at your convenience." Sarah thanked the nurse and immediately dialed Clara's number. "They're in," she said, her voice shaky. "Are you ready?" Clara's voice held the same mix of anxiety and resolve. "Let's do this. I'll meet you at the clinic in an hour." The drive to the clinic felt like a blur. Sarah could hardly remember turning on the car, let alone the journey itself. When she arrived, she saw Clara standing near the entrance, clutching her purse with white-knuckled fingers. They exchanged a brief, silent nod and walked in together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. At the reception desk, they were handed a sealed envelope. For a moment, neither of them moved, each woman gripping the envelope as though it contained not just answers but a piece of their souls. Clara finally broke the silence. "Shall we open it here, or let's go to the park nearby?" Sarah suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere quiet." They walked to a small, secluded park, finding a bench beneath a large oak tree. The envelope felt heavier than it should as Sarah slid her finger under the seal, her hands trembling. She glanced at Clara, who nodded, bracing herself. Slowly, Sarah unfolded the paper inside, scanning the words. She felt her pulse quicken as her eyes fell on the results. Positive match for full siblings. She looked up, her eyes meeting Clara's. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The words on the paper confirmed what they had both feared and hoped. "They're brothers," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "They're really brothers." Clara covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Oh my God, how could this happen? The enormity of the situation settled over them, a mix of shock, sadness, and relief. They had solved the mystery, but now 1,000 new questions flooded their minds. How could they have been separated? Why hadn't they been told? Who had decided that these boys, these brothers, would grow up apart? In the days that followed, Sarah and Clara dug into the adoption records, reaching out to the agency and demanding answers. They were met with resistance, legal jargon, and vague explanations that only fueled their determination. Finally, they managed to arrange a meeting with a representative from the adoption agency. The woman, a middle-aged professional with a polished appearance, greeted them with a rehearsed smile. "Mrs. Jenkins, Mrs. Parker, I understand you have questions about your son's adoptions." "Yes," Sarah said, her tone firm. "We want to know why our boys, who are clearly siblings, were separated and adopted by different families." This wasn't something we were told about, and we deserve answers. The representative shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the papers in front of her. I understand your concerns, but the adoption records are confidential, and in closed adoptions, the biological background of the children is not disclosed to the adoptive families. But this is different, Clara interjected, her voice rising slightly. They're brothers. We're not talking about distant relatives here. We're talking about full siblings who were split apart. Surely there must be more information you can give us. The woman's polite facade began to crack. Mrs. Parker, I understand your frustration, but these were decisions made by the agency based on the information and circumstances at the time. Sometimes, certain details are withheld for the benefit of the child and to ensure the placement is stable. Are you saying you deliberately kept this from us? Sarah asked, her tone sharp. The representative sighed. It's not that simple. Sometimes, the agency has to make difficult choices. In cases like these, when the biological family is unable to care for the children, we try to find the best possible situation for each child. But separating them, Clara pressed, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. Don't you understand what they've missed out on? They could have grown up together. They could have had each other. The representative looked away, a flicker of regret crossing her face. I'm sorry, truly, but the decisions have been made, and we can't change the past. All I can do is apologize and offer to connect you with a counselor if you need support. Sarah and Clara left the meeting feeling more frustrated than ever. They had learned nothing that could explain the separation, nothing to justify the choices that had been made. That night, Sarah lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Her mind replayed the day's events, the look on Clara's face, and the confusion in Ethan's eyes when she tucked him in, promising him answers soon. The truth was still raw, still incomplete, but she knew one thing with certainty. She would do whatever it took to make sure Ethan and Tyler knew the full story. They had a right to know. We're digging deeper into the mystery. In the following days, Sarah and Clara found themselves consumed by the search for answers. They couldn't let go of the idea that someone had intentionally kept their son's connection a secret. They had scored every document, called every agency contact they could think of, and reviewed countless adoption files, but the official records remained frustratingly vague. For both women, this was now about more than the past. It was about giving their sons the family connection they had been deprived of. And maybe, just maybe, uncovering something more sinister in the process. One evening, while browsing through her old emails, Sarah found one from a lawyer who had been involved in Ethan's adoption years ago. It was brief, professional, but at the time, she had sensed a certain coldness in his tone that she now couldn't ignore. She immediately called Clara, her voice tense with excitement. Clara, I think we need to talk to the lawyer who handled Ethan's adoption. I know it's a long shot, but maybe he'll have some information that's not in the official documents. Clara agreed without hesitation, and together, they scheduled an appointment to meet with him. They didn't have high expectations. Lawyers tended to be tight-lipped and protective of confidential information, but they were willing to try anything to learn the truth. 2 days later, Sarah and Clara found themselves sitting in the stark, intimidating office of Mr. James Halstead, the adoption attorney who had represented Sarah and Mark when they adopted Ethan. He was a tall man in his 60s, with thinning gray hair and a demeanor that was both polite and unapproachable. He regarded them with an expression of mild curiosity as he settled into his chair. Mrs. Jenkins, Mrs. Parker, it's been some time. How can I assist you today? Sarah took a deep breath, glancing briefly at Clara for support. Mr. Halstead, I believe you handled the legal aspects of my son Ethan's adoption. Recently, we discovered that Ethan has a twin, Clara's son, Tyler. This wasn't something we were ever informed about, and we're trying to understand how this happened. The lawyer's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered with a hint of recognition. I see. Well, the adoption process can be complex, and sometimes information about the biological family is not always disclosed. It's possible the agency was unaware of this connection at the time. Sarah leaned forward, her voice growing firmer. Mr. Halstead, with all due respect, we believe someone knew. The resemblance between Ethan and Tyler is undeniable. There's no way this could have slipped through the cracks without someone noticing. Halstead's expression hardened, and he shifted uncomfortably. I'm afraid I can't discuss confidential details of other cases. The agency's decisions are final, and all relevant information is included in the adoption files. Clara spoke up, her tone sharp. Mr. Halstead, we're not asking for confidential information about anyone else. We're asking for the truth about our sons. We deserve to know why they were separated. The lawyer sighed, pressing his fingers together. Even if I wanted to help, my hands are tied. I can't disclose anything outside of what's already in the official record. The agency operates under strict policies. Sarah felt her frustration mounting. This isn't just about policies. This is about two brothers who were separated, and two mothers who are left in the dark. You're telling us there's nothing you can do. Halstead's gaze softened for a moment, as if he was weighing his options. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice. Listen, there's something you might look into. Years ago, there was a private investigator who occasionally worked with the agency, mainly on cases involving particularly complex adoptions. He might still be practicing, though he's semi-retired now. Clara's eyes widened. A private investigator. Halstead nodded subtly. His name is Raymond Cross. He might be able to give you a different perspective. But remember, he operates independently. I've given you all I can. He handed Sarah a slip of paper with the investigator's contact information, then quickly ushered them out of his office, his parting words short and formal. Good luck, he said, closing the door with a look that suggested he'd already said more than he should have. The drive home was filled with a tense silence. Sarah clutched the slip of paper as if it were a lifeline. A private investigator. It sounded like something out of a movie, but if it brought them any closer to the truth, it was worth pursuing. When she returned home, Sarah found herself staring at the phone, unsure if she was ready for what this might reveal. After a moment's hesitation, she dialed the number on the paper. The line rang several times before a gravelly voice answered. Raymond Cross here. Mr. Cross, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I was given your contact information by James Halstead. He mentioned that you might be able to help me with a family matter. There was a brief pause on the other end. Go on. Sarah quickly summarized the situation. The separated brothers, the adoption agency's secrecy, and their growing suspicion that something had been concealed from them. She wasn't sure how much to share, but something about Cross's voice put her at ease. Interesting, he said finally. I haven't worked with the agency in years, but I remember they were known to be selective with their information. I'd be willing to look into this for you, but I'll need access to any records you have on file, and possibly a retainer. Whatever you need, Sarah replied, relief flooding through her. Just tell me where to start. Over the next week, Sarah and Clara gathered every document, every piece of paperwork related to Ethan's and Tyler's adoptions. They met with Cross in his dimly lit office, a place filled with old books, maps, and files piled high on every surface. Cross was a serious man with a rough exterior but a keen analytical mind. He spent hours poring over the documents, muttering to himself as he connected dots and highlighted inconsistencies. Finally, he looked up, his face grave. There are a few things here that don't add up, he said, tapping his pen on a specific section of the documents. Firstly, both adoption records indicate an unusually high level of redaction, more than what's typical for closed adoptions. This suggests someone went out of their way to obscure certain details. Sarah's heart raced. What does that mean? It means someone had something to hide, Cross replied bluntly. I also noted that both adoptions were expedited, which is unusual. Most adoptions take time, especially if there's paperwork involved. But in these cases, it seems someone pushed these through quickly. Clara frowned. But why? Why would anyone want to separate two siblings and rush their adoptions? Cross's expression turned somber. Sometimes, adoptions are expedited when there's pressure from someone powerful, or when there are complications with the biological family. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Complications? Like what? Cross leaned back, his gaze unflinching. I've seen cases where children were placed under protective services because of threats, or because someone involved wanted the children out of the picture quickly. The room fell silent as Sarah and Clara processed his words. The idea that their sons might have been separated deliberately, possibly to keep them hidden, was almost too much to bear. So what do we do now? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cross looked at them both, his eyes filled with determination. I'll need a few days to dig deeper. I'll look into the agency's records and see if I can track down anyone who was involved at the time of the adoption. But be prepared for the possibility that this goes higher than we thought. Sarah's head spun with questions and fears, but she nodded, knowing that they were finally on a path to answers. In the days that followed, Sarah and Clara tried to keep life as normal as possible for Ethan and Tyler. They arranged more playdates, allowing the boys to bond, while keeping their investigation a secret from them. Watching the two children together only reinforced their determination. The boys were inseparable, laughing and playing as if they'd known each other their entire lives. One afternoon, while the boys were playing outside, Sarah noticed a file Cross had left on her kitchen counter. Inside, there was a photograph of a woman with strikingly similar features to both Ethan and Tyler. Cross had noted that this woman, Jessica Morell, had given birth to twins before her whereabouts became unknown. She was last seen shortly after the boy's birth. As she stared at the photo, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of connection. This woman, Jessica, was likely the biological mother of their sons. But where had she gone? Why had her children been placed in separate homes, never knowing about each other? Sarah knew this was the lead they needed. Cross would be tracking down Jessica's last known associates, searching for anyone who might shed light on what had happened. But in her heart, Sarah feared the worst, that Jessica had been forced to give up her sons and had been silenced ever since. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah sat down with Clara to discuss their next steps. They were ready to confront anyone who stood in the way of the truth. They knew the risks but were unwilling to stop now. Whatever secrets lay ahead, whatever truths they were about to uncover, Sarah and Clara were determined to bring Ethan and Tyler the answers they deserved. The two mothers knew that this journey was just beginning, and the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But they also knew, with unwavering conviction, that they would not rest until they brought their sons the family and the truth that had been denied to them for far too long. The truth unveiled. As days turned into weeks, Sarah and Clara became embroiled in their quest for answers. The anticipation was palpable. Each ring of the phone sent jolts of adrenaline through Sarah's veins as she awaited news from Raymond Cross. Every conversation they had with Ethan and Tyler seemed charged with an urgency that both boys were blissfully unaware of. It was a typical Saturday morning when Sarah received the call she had been waiting for. She was preparing pancakes in the kitchen when her phone rang, the sound cutting through the sizzling of the griddle. She quickly wiped her hands on a dish towel and answered, her heart racing. "Sarah, it's Raymond Cross." The investigator's voice came through, low and serious. "I've got some information." Her stomach dropped as she glanced at the boys, playing Legos in the living room. "What did you find out?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety within her. "First, I tracked down Jessica Morell," Cross said, pausing for dramatic effect. "She's alive. But there's more to the story than we initially thought." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Where is she? Is she okay?" "She's in a rehabilitation center outside of Richmond. It seems she was struggling with substance abuse after a series of traumatic events surrounding the births of her children. But she has been clean for over a year and is starting to piece her life back together," Cross explained. Sarah felt a mix of relief and concern. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, but it also opened up a host of new questions. "What do we do now?" she asked, her mind racing. "I believe she'd be willing to meet with you and Clara. It might be emotional, but it could provide the closure you both need," Cross suggested. "What about the boys?" Sarah asked, her heart aching at the thought of involving them in such a heavy situation. Cross hesitated. "I would advise against bringing them into this just yet. Let's see how Jessica feels about the situation before we introduce them. I think it's crucial for the two of you to speak with her first." "Okay," Sarah agreed, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on her shoulders. "Let's set it up." The next week was filled with anxious anticipation as Sarah and Clara prepared to meet Jessica. They both felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, knowing that this meeting could change everything. On the day of the meeting, Clara arrived at Sarah's house early, her expression reflecting the storm of emotions swirling within her. "Are you ready?" Clara asked, her voice a mixture of hope and fear. "I think so," Sarah replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the collar of her shirt. "I just want to make sure we say the right things." "Just be honest," Clara encouraged, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We're in this together. Whatever happens, we'll face it as a team." The drive to the rehabilitation center was quiet, filled with both women's thoughts of what they would say to Jessica. As they pulled into the parking lot, Sarah's heart raced with every step they took toward the building. The facility was bright and welcoming, a stark contrast to the heavy emotions she carried inside. Inside, they were greeted by a kind receptionist who led them to a small meeting room. The walls were adorned with inspirational quotes, and the atmosphere felt warm, if a bit clinical. As they waited, Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. She was both nervous and excited to meet the woman who had given birth to their sons. When Jessica entered the room, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The woman looked to be in her early 30s, with sun-kissed skin and deep-set hazel eyes. Her hair was a rich chestnut brown, pulled back in a loose ponytail. Jessica carried herself with an air of fragility, but her gaze was steady as she approached the two women. "Hi, I'm Jessica," she said softly, offering a tentative smile. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. "This is Clara, Mike's mom." Jessica nodded, her smile widening slightly as she looked at Clara. "It's nice to meet you." The three women settled into their chairs, and for a moment, silence hung heavily in the air. Finally, Sarah spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been trying to understand what happened after you gave birth to your sons." Jessica's expression changed, her eyes dimming as she took a deep breath. It's complicated. I wasn't in a good place when I had them. I was overwhelmed and scared. I didn't feel equipped to be a mother, and I was afraid I would fail them." Sarah's heart ached for Jessica. "We just want to know why they were placed for adoption without any mention of their twin, Eden and Mike. They're so close, and it's as if they've been kept apart for so long." Jessica's face twisted with pain. "When I gave birth, I was young and struggling. I didn't have the support I needed. The agency told me that adopting them out separately would be best for their future. They told me it was the only option." Clara's brow furrowed. "But how could they not tell you that they had a twin? That seems so wrong." "I was too far gone," Jessica admitted, her voice choked with emotion. "I was in and out of treatment, and by the time I got my life back on track, it was too late. They'd already been placed with their families." "But you could have fought for them, couldn't you?" Sarah urged, her heart breaking for the boys. "I didn't know how," Jessica replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "I was scared and alone. When I finally got sober, I had no idea where they were. The agency kept everything so tightly sealed." Clara reached across the table, her voice gentle. "Jessica, we want to help you find them. They deserve to know you, and you deserve to know them. Can you help us?" Jessica looked down, biting her lip as if weighing her options. "I want to. more than anything. But I fear what I might have to confront. I didn't just lose my sons. I lost a part of myself when I made those choices. Sarah leaned in, her heart full of empathy. You're not alone in this. We're in it together, and we want to support you. Jessica nodded slowly, wiping away a tear. Okay, I'll help you. I need to do this for them. The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of emotions as Sarah, Clara, and Jessica formed a bond over their shared purpose. They began the painstaking process of tracking down the adoption agency's records, digging through paperwork, and reaching out to anyone who might have information about the boys' adoptions. As they worked together, Sarah and Clara discovered more about Jessica's past, her struggles with addiction, and her fight to regain control of her life. They learned that she had faced tremendous challenges, including abusive relationships and financial hardships that had ultimately led to her making difficult choices. Yet through it all, a resilient spirit shone through Jessica's narrative. She had fought back from the brink, working to rebuild her life, and now she was ready to embrace the possibility of reuniting with her sons. One evening, as they pored over documents in Jessica's small apartment, Clara stumbled upon a file labeled Twins. Her heart raced as she opened it, revealing an envelope filled with photographs. Baby pictures of Ethan and Tyler, nestled together in a crib, their little hands clasped tightly around each other. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she picked up one of the photos, feeling the weight of their shared connection. They were together. They were meant to be together, she whispered. Jessica glanced over, her eyes wide with surprise. I never knew there were pictures. I thought I lost everything in the chaos. Clara placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. You didn't lose them, Jessica. They were kept from you. But now you have the chance to bring them back together. As they examined the photos, a sense of hope filled the room. The boys might be separated by circumstance, but they were still brothers, and the bond they shared was unbreakable. With newfound determination, they decided to set up a meeting with Ethan and Tyler. Sarah knew the moment was crucial. She wanted to protect her son while also allowing him to forge his own relationship with Mike. As they prepared for the meeting, Sarah's heart raced. Would the boys understand? Would they embrace the idea of having a brother they never knew existed? On the day of the meeting, Sarah's nerves were palpable. She and Clara stood at the park entrance, anxiously awaiting the boys. Sarah had chosen a cozy picnic area, the sun shining bright above, and the scent of blooming flowers filling the air. When Ethan and Mike arrived, their excitement was infectious. They dashed over, grinning and animated, clearly unaware of the significance of this day. Mom, Mike and I are going to go play on the swings, Ethan exclaimed, tugging at Sarah's hand. Just a minute, sweetie, Sarah said gently, kneeling to his level. We need to talk first, okay? Ethan looked puzzled, glancing at Mike, who mirrored his confusion. Clara knelt beside Mike, preparing to explain. Boys, we have some very important news, she began, her voice steady. You both have a twin brother. Ethan's eyes widened. What do you mean? Sarah glanced at Clara, who continued, You and Mike are twins. You were born together, and you were adopted separately. The boys exchanged incredulous looks, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. No way, Mike exclaimed, his excitement bubbling over. That's awesome. So, I have a brother. Yes, Clara confirmed, her eyes shining with pride. You two are connected in a way that's truly special. Your family. Ethan jumped up, his laughter ringing out. This is the best day ever, he shouted, grabbing Mike's hand and pulling him toward the swings. Let's go play. Sarah and Clara exchanged smiles, relief washing over them. They had taken the first step toward healing and uniting their families. As the boys ran off to play, Clara turned to Sarah. We did it, she said, her voice filled with emotion. They'll grow up knowing each other, and they won't have to go through life wondering why they felt different. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with hope. Yes, and now they can create their own memories as brothers. The days that followed were a blend of laughter, adventure, and newfound connection. The boys spent weekends together, and each time Sarah saw them playing, she felt a wave of joy. One afternoon, as they gathered for a family barbecue, Sarah caught sight of the two boys racing through the yard, their laughter ringing out like music. They were so similar, yet so uniquely themselves. The bond between them was undeniable, and it brought her immense comfort knowing they would never have to face the world alone again. As summer began to fade into autumn, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey to reunite Ethan and Mike had led her to find strength within herself, as well as the realization that family isn't always defined by blood. Together, Sarah, Clara, and Jessica were forging a new path, one filled with love, acceptance, and the promise of new beginnings. And as they watched their sons play together, it was clear that they were no longer bound by their past. They were finally stepping into a future filled with hope and connection. The journey was not over. There would be challenges and hurdles ahead, but together they would face whatever came their way, armed with the knowledge that love and family could conquer anything. New beginnings. As autumn arrived, the golden leaves blanketed the park where the boys played, and a sense of warmth filled the air. The families had settled into a rhythm, their lives intertwined as they navigated this new chapter together. Sarah and Clara had become close friends, united by their shared experiences, and Jessica was slowly integrating herself into their lives, cherishing every moment spent with Ethan and Mike. One crisp Saturday morning, Clara suggested hosting a family picnic at the park, a way to celebrate the boys' new bond and solidify their growing family ties. Sarah loved the idea, and soon plans were in motion. Clara and Jessica coordinated the food, while Sarah focused on setting up a cozy space with blankets and games. The day of the picnic arrived, and excitement buzzed in the air. Ethan and Mike dashed around, eagerly helping to unpack the car, their laughter echoing as they raced to lay out the blankets. Jessica watched, her heart swelling with joy as she took in the scene. She never imagined she would have the opportunity to be involved in her sons' lives again. "Look, Mom, we can have the sandwiches here," Ethan exclaimed, pointing to a spot under a large oak tree. "That sounds perfect, buddy," Sarah replied, smiling at the enthusiasm radiating from both boys. As the picnic got underway, the atmosphere was filled with the aroma of homemade sandwiches, chips, and fruit. The family settled down on the blankets, laughter mingling with the sound of rustling leaves. Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how far they had all come. The challenges they had faced seemed like a distant memory as she watched the boys play together. The connection between them was undeniable. They chased each other through the grass, mimicking superheroes, and climbed trees, their imaginations running wild. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Sarah gathered everyone for a group photo. "All right, everyone, let's get a picture to remember this day," she called out, excitement bubbling within her. The boys instantly ran to the front, positioning themselves with arms around each other's shoulders, grinning from ear to ear. Clara and Jessica joined them, with Sarah crouching down in front, holding the camera at arm's length. "Safe family," Sarah shouted, capturing the moment. The sound of joyous laughter erupted as the camera clicked, freezing a picture of pure happiness. Later, as they sat together enjoying dessert, Clara turned to Jessica. "I want to thank you for being so open with us. It means a lot," she said, her voice sincere. Jessica smiled, her eyes misty. "I just want to be a part of their lives. They deserve to know me, and I want to be there for them." "Do you think they'll ever understand the full story?" Sarah asked, her expression thoughtful. "I hope so. But for now, I want them to enjoy their childhood without any heavy burdens," Jessica replied, her heart aching at the thought of what the boys had missed. "We can tell them when the time is right." The rest of the picnic unfolded in joy. They played games, shared stories, and enjoyed the comfort of family that had been absent for so long. Sarah felt a warmth in her heart, knowing they were moving forward as a united front. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the boys deepened. They would often spend weekends together, exploring parks, playing video games, and sharing secrets like any brothers would. Sarah felt a newfound sense of peace, watching them grow closer and supporting each other in their adventures. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Jessica was still navigating the process of rebuilding her life, and the boys often brought up questions about their past. One evening, as they were playing in the backyard, Ethan turned to Jessica, his curiosity bubbling over. "Can you tell us more about our birth parents?" he asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Jessica hesitated, glancing at Sarah, who offered her an encouraging nod. "Of course," she said gently, kneeling down to their level. "Your birth parents loved you very much, but they faced a lot of difficulties when you were born. It wasn't easy for them." "Did they want to keep us?" Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jessica felt a pang in her heart. Yes, they did. But sometimes, things happen that make it difficult for parents to care for their children. They made the choice to give you the best chance at a happy life, even if that meant letting you go. The boys listened intently, absorbing the weight of the words. "But you found us," Ethan said, his voice filled with hope. "I did, and I want to be a part of your lives now," Jessica replied, her eyes brimming with emotion. "We're family, and family sticks together." As the sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the yard, Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around the boys. "And now you have two moms who love you very much," she said, smiling brightly. "We're going to make sure you always have support and love, no matter what." The boys smiled, the worry dissipating from their faces as they embraced the love surrounding them. However, as they continued to navigate this new life, Sarah sensed that George was still struggling to come to terms with their evolving family dynamics. He had been distant lately, and she could feel the tension in their home. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Sarah decided it was time to confront him. She found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone, a distracted look on his face. "George, we need to talk," Sarah said, her voice firm yet gentle. He looked up, surprised. "About what?" "About us, about this family," she replied, taking the seat next to him. "I can feel that something is bothering you. I want to understand." George sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, this whole situation is overwhelming. I'm happy for the boys, I really am. But it feels like everything is changing so fast." "I know it's a lot to process," Sarah acknowledged, her heart aching for him. "But we're building something beautiful here. The boys are so happy together, and we need to support them. I just can't shake the feeling that I should have done something different," George admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "When I found out about their resemblance, I felt this pressure." "Pressure?" Sarah interrupted, her brow furrowing. "What pressure?" "To keep secrets." George looked pained. "I didn't want to scare you. I didn't know how to handle it. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all work itself out. But it didn't, did it? It created more distance between us," Sarah said, her voice softening. "We need to communicate, especially now." "I'm sorry," he whispered, his eyes reflecting the weight of his emotions. "I want to be there for you and for the boys. I don't want to lose any of you." Sarah reached out, taking his hand in hers. "You won't lose us. We're in this together, but you have to let me in. We need to be a team." With a heavy sigh, George nodded. "You're right. I'll try. I want to be part of this family. I just didn't know how." Sarah squeezed his hand, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "Let's take it one day at a time. We're all learning, and we'll figure this out together." As the weeks passed, the bond between Sarah, Clara, Jessica, and the boys deepened further. They began organizing family outings, sharing responsibilities, and creating a network of love and support for the children. One Saturday, they planned a family camping trip, eager to embrace nature and make memories together. Sarah was particularly excited. The boys would have a chance to bond even more. and it would give her an opportunity to connect with Jessica. The campsite was nestled in a serene forest, with tall trees casting dappled sunlight on the ground. As they set up their tents, laughter filled the air. The boys ran off to explore, collecting sticks and leaves, while the adults prepared dinner. That evening, they gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Jessica smiled at the boys, her heart swelling with gratitude. She felt as if she had been granted a second chance to be a mother, and she was determined to make the most of it. "Tell us a scary story, Mom," Mike shouted, his eyes wide with excitement. "Yeah, tell us," Eden echoed, bouncing in his seat. Clara exchanged amused glances with Sarah. "All right, I've got one." Clara began, spinning a tale about a family who got lost in the woods. As she wove the story, the boys leaned closer, wide-eyed and entranced. In the midst of the story, Sarah caught Jessica's eye and smiled. They had come so far together. Just a few months ago, Jessica had been a stranger. Now, they were family, and they were committed to making sure their boys grew up knowing love and support. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, Sarah couldn't help but feel a profound sense of joy. They had faced their fears, learned to communicate, and formed a bond that would last a lifetime. Eden and Mike burst into laughter, their spirits high as they continued to tease each other, sharing stories of their favorite superheroes. "Just wait until we tell everyone at school that we're twins," Eden declared, his eyes shining with excitement. Jessica laughed softly, her heart brimming with love for her sons. "Yes, you'll have the best story to tell." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the campfire, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly at peace. She glanced at George, who smiled back at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. They had all taken a journey toward acceptance, love, and family. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And as the stars twinkled above them, they knew they had forged a new beginning, one filled with laughter, adventure, and a bond that would never be broken.